How famous can a killer become? How deep a legacy can a shadow truly leave? The story we are telling today is not about a murder that was solved. This is the story of the one ghost who started modern criminal mythology, the most famous, most brutal, and most elusive killer who was never caught. This is the story of the Autumn of Terror, the fall of 1888, when the streets of London changed forever. This is the story of Jack the Ripper. This narrative doesn't just tell us about the brutality of one man. It tells us about the desperation hidden in the dark, beating heart of an empire. He didn't just kill his victims. He killed the innocence of an entire era, and all he left behind were a handful of bloody letters and one unanswered question. Who was he? To understand any of it, we must go to Whitechapel, 1888. Whitechapel was the poorest, darkest, and most dangerous square mile in the capital of the richest empire in the world. This was a place of narrow, muddy alleys, where the gaslight barely cut through the thick industrial fog. This was a place where the smoke from factories, slaughterhouses, and human misery choked the air. And this was home to thousands of desperate women, women forced to sell their bodies every single night just to survive. Our characters are not heroes, they are survivors. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. To history, these names are just a victim list, but they were real people. Women approaching their 50s or in their 40s, worn down by life, struggling with alcoholism, whose only goal was to earn the few pennies needed for a bed in a lodging house. They were the most invisible parts of society, until someone noticed them. Until the end of August, 1888, violence in Whitechapel was common. It was brutal, but it was predictable. Until the night of August 31st. That night, Mary Ann Nichols had spent her lodging money on gin. She was left to the streets. Around 3:40 a.m., when a man found her body in the darkness of Bucks Row, it was clear this was not a normal murder. This was butchery. This was something inhuman. When the police arrived, they assumed they could solve it, a common street fight. They were wrong. This was only the beginning. Just 8 days later, on the morning of September 8th, the body of Annie Chapman was found. The brutality was worse. It was more methodical, more surgical. The police understood it then. This wasn't a random fight. This was a monster. This was a hunter, stalking Whitechapel, selecting a specific type of victim, and becoming bolder in his actions. The newspapers went insane. The city of London was shaken by something it had never seen before, a media frenzy. The killer wasn't just murdering women. He was selling terror to an entire city. But the worst was not yet here, because the killer began to mock the police. He started sending them letters, and for the first time, he used that signature, Jack the Ripper. The Autumn of Terror had truly begun. The killer was now a celebrity, and the city was his stage. The police were helpless. They had no forensics. They had no fingerprinting. They had thousands of witnesses who saw suspicious men, but no two descriptions ever matched. The fog of Whitechapel was the perfect accomplice. And then came the double event. On the night of September 30th, the killer showed his ultimate contempt for the authorities. He decided that one victim was not enough. At 1 a.m., the body of Elizabeth Stride was found. Her throat was cut, but the killer had been interrupted before the mutilation could begin. The police flooded the area. They assumed the killer had fled, but he hadn't. He was just angry. Angry that his work was interrupted. Less than 1 hour later, and only a few streets away, he found Catherine Eddowes. He did not make the same mistake. The brutality was unspeakable. He was not just killing, he was performing. The city went into total panic. This was not a man. This was a phantom who could kill, disappear, and kill again, while the entire London police force was surrounding him. The police were desperate, and the killer knew it. He sent the most infamous letter of all, not to the press, but to the leader of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, the From Hell letter. It didn't just contain boasts. It contained a piece of Catherine Eddowes' kidney, which the killer claimed he had fried and eaten. This was the ultimate act of psychological warfare. Jack the Ripper wasn't just a murderer. He was a cannibal, taunting the very men trying to hunt him. There was one final act, the masterpiece of his horror. Mary Jane Kelly. She was different from the others. She was younger, in her 20s, and considered beautiful. The others, he killed in the dark alleys. Quickly, Mary Jane Kelly. He killed indoors, in her own small rented room at 13 Miller's Court. What the police found in that room on November 9th broke even the most hardened officers. Having the luxury of time, privacy, and a locked door, the Ripper had revealed his true nature. The mutilation was total. He had spent hours. This was not a man. It was something else entirely. This was the work of the devil. This was his final, terrifying performance. And then he stopped. The murders ceased. The letters stopped. The fog of the autumn of terror lifted. Jack the Ripper, having dominated the entire world's imagination for 3 months, simply vanished. He was never caught. His identity was never known. He dissolved back into the streets of London, leaving only 5 victims, a city traumatized, and the single greatest mystery in the history of crime. So, who was he? Why did he stop? This is where the analysis begins. The investigation was doomed from the start. The police force of 1888 was not equipped for this. Forensics did not exist. Crime scenes were immediately contaminated by the public, by journalists, and by the police themselves. They had no database, no way to track patterns. They were looking for a madman, a butcher, someone covered in blood. But the truth is likely quieter. The truth is that the Ripper was probably normal. He may have been a local resident, someone who walked those streets every day, someone who went back to his normal life after the killings, invisible. Over the last 130 years, the theories have become a library of their own. There are hundreds of suspects. The most famous is Montague Druitt, a barrister and teacher who reportedly went insane and drowned himself in the Thames right after the final murder. It was a convenient answer for the police. Others insist it must have been a doctor or a surgeon, someone with the anatomical skill to perform the mutilations. A mad doctor, hiding in the slums. And then, there are the darker conspiracies. The theories involving the royal family, a painter, or a political plot to silence the victims. But these are just stories. They are attempts to give this terrifying random violence a meaning. My personal analysis. The truth of the Ripper is in his choice of victims. He chose the invisible. The women society had already thrown away. He chose them because he knew, in 1888 London, that nobody would really care. The press cared about the scandal. The rich cared about the fear. But nobody cared about the victims themselves. The Ripper didn't just expose the failure of the police. He exposed the horrifying hypocrisy of the Victorian age, an age that demanded polite, clean society in the daylight, while ignoring the absolute human misery it was built upon in the dark. This case is the birth of the modern serial killer. It was the first time the media created a celebrity out of a murderer. Jack the Ripper was the first monster to use the press to amplify his terror. And why did he stop? Did he die? Was he arrested for another crime? Or in the most terrifying possibility, was he simply satisfied? Had he completed his work and just went back to his normal life? Did he die an old man, decades later, taking his secret with him to the grave? That is the question that haunts us. The horror of Jack the Ripper isn't just what he did, it is that he was, perhaps indistinguishable from everyone else. He was the invisible man who proved that the greatest monsters don't look like monsters at all. What do you think? Do you believe he was a doctor, a madman, or something else entirely? And why do you think, after all these years, we are still obsessed with solving the one case that cannot be solved? Let me know your theory in the comments below.